Good morning, guys. Welcome aboard. Back for another episode of Mike's MMA Picks Fight Morning Quick Card Breakdown show brought to you by MMA Odds Breaker as well as Bet DSI. UFC 240, Alberta, Canada, Edmonton, to be specific. We are excited, fired up, ready for 11 fights, many of which I expect to end inside the distance. And I'll go on to say this, that some of the lighter weight classes in the men's and women's division, I expect a few of those fights to finish as well. So let's kick things off here with the first fight of the evening. We've got Kyle Guns Up Stewart taking on an old familiar name, Koch. Koch, man, we've remember him from the WEC days, was originally supposed to fight Jose Aldo back at UFC 153 at featherweight. 2019, 170 pounds. The mighty have fallen. Koch lost his father recently. We've seen him fight one time a year. He's dealt with a number of injuries. He's coming in here the much more experienced fighter. Believe it or not, Kyle Stewart began his professional mixed martial arts career. He turned pro back in 2015, so he's only been a professional fighter for about 4 years. Koch, $8,000 in DraftKings, plus 100 underdog. Koch was a Rufus Sport fighter, possesses a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black belt in Taekwondo. What we're getting in Stewart here is someone who's ultra motivated, someone who is, I want to say, one-dimensional in a lot of respects because he doesn't really have a ground game, and he's looking to strike, he's looking to bang, he's looking to close distance, get in opponents' faces, and just overwhelm them with volume. He's going to get his opportunity here against Koch, who's both fighters are 30 years old. Stewart has a 5-inch reach advantage. If Koch is smart, he is going to come out and try to take this fight to the ground where he should have a significant grappling advantage. Even in Stewart's Dana White Contender Series fight, he was taken down and almost finished a few times. So my pick here is going to be Koch, the underdog at plus 100, 8,000 on DraftKings, to get out with a bang here. His career kind of is reminiscent to me of Jordan Mean in this respect, except the late resurgence. We haven't seen that. He looks the part on the scale, but to be determined. Proceed with caution, please. You're taking a risk here with a 15-6 fighter who has not been very active. Next up, we have a hotly debated contest, closely lined fight between Jillian Robertson against Sarah Frota. Sarah Frota, 32 years old. Jillian Robertson, 24 years of age, fighting out of ATT. She's been under the tutelage of Din Thomas for many years, sitting at a minus 145 favorite, 8,600 in DraftKings. Jillian Robertson, we saw her last fight out with Macedo. She was able to lock up a submission, surprised a lot of people who were leaning heavily on the higher-ranked Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, but Jillian Robertson had better wrestling, better BJJ in the cage, and in this fight against Sarah Frota, I posted a picture of Frota earlier in the week. This young lady moves forward. She doesn't give a shit what you're throwing at her. She wants to implement her will. She's an aggressive fighter, black belt, will have a 3-inch reach advantage. Sarah Froda, I expect to be one of the most popular underdogs on the card at plus 125, 7,600 in DraftKings. Fight is not expected to go to a decision. It's bounced around from minus 165 to over minus 200. I also agree that this fight is not going to go the distance. Robertson, she doesn't have the stand-up to strike with Froda, so these girls are going to be rolling around on the ground, and I envision a few advances. Somehow, some way, I expect Robertson to actually take the back of Froda and lock up a rear naked choke submission. Froda is so aggressive. I think she's going to put herself in a bad spot here. If the line's a very close line here, so if Robertson does lose this fight, you want to have pieces of Froda, shares of Froda in DraftKings, because she has the potential to unleash with strikes on top. She also is going to be the more active fighter on the feet, and only danger here is that this fight is gonna end within the distance. So, at 8,600, Robertson, we may not see a lot of her in DraftKings. I suspect we'll see more Froda action coming in. Froda's 9-1. She has a pretty impressive victory over Vivian Araju, who we'll talk about later in the card. And so the pick here is going to be Robertson. Next up, we have in the men's 125-pound division. Glad they are keeping that division around, by the way. Alexandra Pantoja taking on Davison Figueredo. Figueredo 15-1. 15-1, coming off of the loss against Jussier Formiga. Figueredo is a physical specimen, a force. This guy cuts a tremendous amount of weight. 7,900 plus 105 at the betting window. Pantoja has never been finished in his career. 21-3 record. Very impressive. 8,300 in DraftKings. Minus 125 favorite for Pantoja. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 170, but I see this fight as finishing. When I look back at a few of the previous fights of both of these opponents, something that stuck out to me was Figueredo's fight against John Moraga. Man, that was one hell of a battle. You could just see that Figueredo, the pace he puts on his opponents, he's a man possessed when he's out there. During weigh-ins, looked like he had to work really hard to get down to 125 pounds again. Pantoja is he excels in jiu-jitsu, excels standing up, does not have great takedowns. When he gets taken down, he's excellent at fighting off of his back. He's excellent at taking the back of opponents. We saw against Sasaki as well as other fighters on his resume. Is able to come through victorious in those spots. This is going to be a dogfight. And although Pantoja is the more technical striker, I've had a little bit of a change of heart here in the past 72 hours. I think the longer this fight goes, Figueredo is going to gain momentum. He was frustrated in the Formiga fight. I think he's going to find some success here against Pantoja, who at times is hittable. And this may be a little bit of a shock here, but I am leaning Figueredo at this juncture. Pantoja, though, he has the potential to put up some big points. He has the potential to finish. And he is a technical striker. And both of these guys, look at their ages. You know, 29 years old for Pantoja, 31 for Figueredo. So these guys are in their prime right now. Fantastic flyweight fight. I will be tuning in for this one. But as far as DraftKings goes, I think we're going to see... I'm actually very interested. I'm intrigued to see the ownership once these contests go live. But I think Figueredo is, if you want to call him a live dog here, plus 105. He is going to get my my pick. Next up, we have Gavin Tucker taking on Seung-Woo Chu. 145 pounds. The South Korean 7-2 record was kind of thrown to the wolves right off the bat against Evliov. 7,800 in DraftKings, minus 110 at the betting window. Both fighters here coming in at minus 110 right now. Gavin Tucker was originally the favorite. He's been bet down. Gavin Tucker, I haven't seen him in a couple of years. I posted on Twitter a few separate times trying to find out when Gavin Tucker was going to come back after that beating. I wanted him to take some time off. I was thinking Shane Burgos would be a good matchup to come back to. He's going to be facing a pretty powerful striker here in Woo Choi. Tucker does have a solid ground game. He has body type of Cody Garbrandt, but that's where it ends. He strikes with some proficiency. He's at a significant reach disadvantage here. Almost a 10-inch reach advantage. So, that's tough to come back after losing a fight to Rick Glenn in the fashion that he did, getting totally picked apart, annihilated. I would be cautious of playing Gavin Tucker in this spot. You got to wonder where his head is at after being out for so long and recovering from that beating. I will say this, though. Choi, he's going to be looking to stand and bang, and if Gavin Tucker has his wits about him, he's going to try to take this kid down and implement his will. Looking back at the Sam Cecilia fight, Gavin Tucker was able to land a takedown, though it honestly looked more like a linebacker trying to tackle an opponent the way he took Cecilia down. And I'm a bit concerned about his technical prowess when it comes to takedowns. And if he's not able to get this fight to the ground, he may be in huge, huge trouble. So I understand why the line has closed. And I think the sneaky play here is going to be Gavin Tucker. I do see him possibly winning by submission. Choi, if he's doing his thing, he could look for a volume-based decision. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 175. So, very, very, very close fight. I'm going to be leaning Gavin Tucker in this spot. It may be, I know it's a dangerous spot to be picking Tucker here coming off of that hellacious beating at the hands of Rick Glenn, but I think Tucker, with the amount of time he took off and also devoting his efforts to strengthening his ground game, that's a smart way to go about this. So take the least path of resistance, and that would be Gavin Tucker winning a wrestling and grappling based decision. So I'm going to go with Tucker here as a this line may flip, but we'll see for the win. But in DraftKings, Choi, he's going to be striking and striking often. He's going to use that huge reach. I think it's going to be smart to have shares of both fighters out there. Next up, another intriguing fight. In the men's 145-pound division, we've got Hakeem Dawodu taking on Yoshinori Horry. Yoshinori Horry, Japanese fighter from Pancrase. Very, very interesting spot here. 8-1 record. When you look at who he's fought, it's incredible. Some of the guys are in their late 30s, early 40s. This kid's only 24 years old. I wish Aaron Pico went this route, building his resume. So this kid comes in, Horry comes in 6,900 plus 305 underdog. He's a very, very accurate, powerful striker. Kickboxing, prowess. He's got killer instinct. But again, who's he fighting? He has been knocked out once before as well. So this fight isn't expected to go to a decision at -160. Hakeem Dawodu, 9-1. Didn't look that great against Bochniak. He also took a loss in his first fight in the UFC. 42-5 kickboxing record before coming to the UFC. 28 years of age. Hometown fighter, 9,300 for Dawodu. -385 favorite. He could come out here and pick Horry apart. I think that Horry is a bit more alive than the line suggests. He's a bit of an unknown, not fighting in America. So making that trip across the pond, I understand the wide line. And Dawodu, you know, one thing about him also is he doesn't go for the kill. Frustrated a lot of DraftKings owners in the Austin Arnett fight. And I expect him to do the same here, kind of get caught up in the moment and realize that he has a very dangerous opponent on his hands. And I'm going to pick Dawodu by decision, but I wouldn't be surprised if Horry puts up a fight. Now, we head to the women's 125-pound division, where we see Alexis Davis, who had a lengthy career at 135 pounds, dropped down to 125, just been down there for a few fights, taking on Viviane Araujo. Araujo's 7-1 record, 9,100 in DraftKings, -190 favorite. Araujo, a late bloomer. There's a great MMA Junkie article out there. It speaks a little bit to her progression and how she got into mixed martial arts. She was a soccer player who, at 19 years of age, began Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and started climbing through the ranks. At one point was I believe the third best brown belt in Brazil at one point at her respective weight class. Now, she's developed some striking here, and her win over Toledo Bernardo showcased what she's capable of. I realize Bernardo is not the highest caliber opponent, and that was up 2 weight classes from Araujo. At 115 pounds, she went up to 135. She actually weighed in at 131 pounds for that fight. Araujo is now a full-fledged black belt. She has taken a loss to Froda. I witnessed that fight. She looked good early, striking, and then Froda walked her down, similar to in a way that I would suspect Alexis Davis is going to try to do. And Araujo was having some success on the feet early, but then didn't want to play in Froda's guard, pulled out, and got walked down and then finished. Araujo saw a sports psychologist since that fight. That was actually, I believe, her 3rd or 4th professional fight. Now she's 7-1. That was back in 2017. So it was a few years ago. Araujo's rattled off a few fights since then. We've seen some drastic improvements in her striking. She has heavy hands. We know that she can go 3 rounds. The Bernardo fight, she took that on 3 days' notice. She came in shredded at that weight class as well when she came in at 131 pounds. Now this fight is at 125 pounds. We have Alexis Davis, 7,100 in DraftKings, plus 160. The line has closed significantly for Davis. Canadian fighter, very, very gritty. Alexis Davis comes from the Stone Age of women's MMA. She, what can you say? Coming off of a loss to Jennifer Maia, has fought the who's who in the 135-pound division, and she's fought well against Liz Carmouche. These are different fighters. I am banking on Araju being the fresher fighter with much less mileage on her. I also think that the 125-pound weight class is going to help Araju as far as her ability to bounce around, keep the fight standing. She was able to shuck Bernardo off like she was nothing in her fight. So I think that we're getting a bit of some value here at 190 for Araju. Now Davis, she is extremely hittable. She looks almost like a zombie moving forward. I know she comes in great shape. People say she's going to use her size here. Only an inch separates them in this matchup. They have the same reach, and at 125 pounds, you're getting a fighter who is coming in. Recency bias is a bitch, but everything I see on tape at this point, at this juncture, leads me to believe that Araju is actually going to be the real deal. We may be wrong. We've seen situations like this in the past where fighters come in with a head of steam, look impressive in their first fight, and then get snuffed out. But I'm going to be taking a big swing here on Araju, and she could get a late finish in this spot. She could win a dominant decision. And I want to see what happens when these two young ladies, or actually when Araju's 32 years old and Alexis Davis is going to be 35 in a few months. I want to see what happens when these two lock up. Alexis Davis also, one thing to mention, that she does not take damage well, and she's been wobbled in a few of her fights. So Araju's going to have to get on her bike and be ready to go 3 hard rounds. And at the end of those 3 rounds, Alexis Davis may be battered and beaten. Another thing to mention, that Alexis Davis has, I believe, the worst inside the distance odds on this entire card. So something to consider for an aging Alexis Davis. You know, is she going to be able to go 3 hard rounds in this spot as well? She's done it before. I made this whole breakdown without mentioning the Cindy Dandois fight. That just speaks for itself as well. So give me Araju to get the win here. In DraftKings, there are better plays than the 9,100. When you look up and down the card, I believe Holloway and Cyborg are up there, as well as Neal. They're all priced a little bit higher, but in that same realm. So take a look at those fighters as well. Next up, we have Kristof Jaco taking on Marc-Andre Barriault. Barriault, 11-2 record. He's fought on the regional scene for a while. Took on Sanchez in his last UFC bout. Went the distance. Showed some real heart and grit in that fight. Kristof Jaco came back after 3 consecutive losses. Had a dominant victory in his last fight. Jaco's going to be coming in with a 4-inch reach advantage. Jaco fighting out of ATT. Looked like he hit a wall at a certain point in his career. had back-to-back-to-back losses to Brad Tavares, Uriah Hall, and Mr. Branch. Jaco, 8,700, minus 170. I'm going to be staying clear of that, minus 170. Jaco, 8,700. We know he has a path to victory here through grappling, through landing takedowns, repeated takedowns. The problem here is durability. Jaco, 29 years old. We know if he gets clipped, he's in big trouble. Barriot, 11-2, 7,500 in DraftKings, plus 150 underdog. It only takes one shot from him. He's fought basically nobody. Adam Hunter, Brendan Kornberger. This is a bit of a dangerous spot in DraftKings because he could get taken down and basically humped for a few rounds. Jaco may try to attempt a few submissions, but Barriot hasn't been submitted before. Hasn't been finished. I'm actually going to roll here in DraftKings. For the most part, I'm going to be picking Barriot. I think he is one of the better underdog options in this spot. Only takes one shot to take somebody like Jaco out. And I did like what I saw from Sanchez. When he had him against the fence, he was digging with body shots, and he would not go away. Despite being grounded multiple times by a high-level wrestler who had been working on his cardio. Sanchez came in notoriously, had bad cardio in a lot of his fights, but he managed to go the distance in that one. So give me the upset here with Barriot at 7,500 in DraftKings. Won't be touching the plus 150 line, though. Now, interesting matchup with a lot of line moving up here. We've got Olivier Mercier taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Tsarukyan, 8,800 in DraftKings, minus 160 favorite. Mercier, plus 140. OAM, he's been around the block. Been under the tutelage of George St. Pierre at TriStar for many years. 7,400 in DraftKings. This fight is expected to go to a decision at minus 250, so I suspect we'll see a lot of OAM out there. I was at the fight between him and Carlos Diego Ferreira a few years ago where he got out-grappled. We can see that that OAM can get out-grappled. Same thing happened against Alex Hernandez, against Gilbert Burns. He can also be outstruck on the feet. OAM he's used this wide stance karate style. I suspect, I've seen it in his training videos. I suspect he'll try to do that again this fight. Arman Tsarukyan, very young, raw in some respects, just so that I can't. It's tough to trust someone at 22 years of age when they're coming in across the pond after a debut that was very impressive against Makhachev. Spent a few weeks at ATT. Tsarukyan, 13-2, has a 2-inch reach advantage. Very, very explosive fighter. I think we're going to see a very back and forth grappling based fight here, and it's going to come down to who has the better gas tank. Tsarukyan, at 22 years of age, was able to go pretty deep in his well on very short notice against Makhachev. I suspect he'll be able to go 3 hard rounds here. When he was down at ATT, he wasn't just there for a photo op. I tweeted this out a few weeks ago that he was sparring with Dustin Poirier and a few other fighters. Hey, he could have been Dustin Poirier's punching bag for all we know. I don't know if he shined down there, but there were a bunch of different fighters who he sparred with, according to his Instagram. I don't know how those sparring sessions went, but that experience has to help. So I'm gonna be rolling with the favorite here at 8,800. I think this may be one of those opportunities. I understand the Nordiev fight has a lot of people on edge, understandably. I think the line has come down to a point where at minus 160, you are getting some value on Sarukian. I'm very excited to watch this fight. I think this might be a good fight to just sit back and watch. But I'll have a few shares of Sarukian in this matchup. A star might be born right before our eyes here, and I'm excited to see that happen. So give me Sarukian here for a grappling-based decision. Next up, we have Nico Price, 7,200 plus 285 underdog, taking on Jeff Neal. Jeff Neal, 28 years old, $9,000 in DraftKings, minus 355 favorite. Very, very impressed with Jeff Neal's composure, especially in the Frank Camacho fight when he had a guy standing right in front of him, basically doing a primal roar, charging at him, trying to get him off of his game. It was not working. Jeff Neal won that fight in spectacular fashion. Also, you talk about a fighter who comes in with a great game plan. Bilal Muhammad typically is coached up very well, and Jeff Neal just systematically picked him apart. Showed great takedown defense and also was able to find ways of getting up in situations where most fighters would basically have to succumb to being on the bottom. And just the way he's been able to post, to show, to not empty his gas tank as well. That's another thing that I've noticed. He's able to go 3 rounds if he needs to. And against Nico Price is going to be coming forward. I suspect Nico is going to try to get this fight to the ground. Nico Price has a pretty solid jiu-jitsu game. I believe he was a brown belt versus Sullivan a couple years ago. I'm not sure if he's been ranked up to a black belt, but in this spot, I think we're going to see Neal roll through here and get finish. Somehow this fight, the fight doesn't go the distance. Odds opened at minus 230, and now it sits at minus 425. So you definitely want a piece of this fight in DraftKings. I see no way that these guys get into any type of ugly match where they're not striking or they're not going for Price, if Price isn't going for a submission. So Price is dangerous. He came out pretty strong against the Dirty Bird, Tim Means, and then was getting lit up in that first round. And as Tim Means was gaining confidence, Nico Price just shellacked him. And, man, we saw what happened when Tim Means fell and broke his ankle on his way out. Nico Price does have significant power in his strikes. And either way, odds are somebody's getting finished in this fight. But Jeff Neal is going to be my play. And I think, man, it's hard to avoid somebody like Holloway up top when he's basically broken the scoreboard a few times from a DraftKings perspective. Brian Ortega was tough as nails, and man, so it's who's going to absorb the punishment here and be willing to take the damage to get these high DraftKings scores tonight. You really have to look at both sides of the fight. Trying to get into a few things here that you might not already know, because this is, again, it's a fight morning breakdown show, and we've seen the weigh-ins. And one thing that stood out to me was just Figueredo, how great he looked on the scale, how motivated he was. Can't draw too much from weigh-ins, but he's a guy who cuts a tremendous amount of weight. There are a few other things that I'll get into before this podcast is over, but we'll continue quickly here. Next up, we got the co-main event of the evening. We got a grizzled vet on the last fight of her contract, Cyborg, 34 years of age, taking on Felicia Spencer, who is a teacher when she's not fighting. Felicia Spencer, 7-0, 28 years old. Very thick woman who probably should be fighting or could be fighting a weight class or two below where she's coming in today at 145 pounds. Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very heavy top game, plus 425 for Spencer, 6,600 in DraftKings. Exploited Megan Anderson in her last fight. Cyborg came out guns blazing against Amanda Nunes. I still believe that it was a winnable fight for Cyborg, but she got caught up in the drama, basically, and wanted to make it a war and prove a point when she could have sat back and systematically destructed Amanda Nunes. Now, Cyborg has a few paths to victory here. She does have a solid jiu-jitsu game. This lady who's devoted her entire life to mixed martial arts, she can get up. Felicia Spencer, if she's going to win, it's going to be submission. This fight is not expected to go to a decision at minus 565. Felicia Spencer's stand-up is atrocious. Throws arm punches. She uses these punches to try to grapple with her opponents. And Cyborg is going to have none of that. She's probably going to be on her bicycle, peppering Cyborg with strikes peppering Spencer with strikes. Cyborg is the much heavier striker, much more seasoned veteran. It's just a matter of when is this fight going to end. I expect it's going to end within the first 2 rounds. And Cyborg is out to prove a point here on the last fight of her contract. I honestly feel like she's being disrespected here. It's very awkward to see her not fight for a title. It's really strange to see this happening. And they just don't have many opponents right now for Cyborg. I believe she was going to take the Amanda Nunes fight. She wanted that rematch. And I would have liked to have seen that, but now we may see Cyborg. My bet is that she goes to PFL and takes on Kayla Harrison. I think that would be an amazing fight. But give me Cyborg by a few different methods of victory. You may want to have a Spencer lineup or two in case she's able to ground Cyborg and somehow manage to get a submission victory. Those are the type of lineups that take down GPPs at some point or another. You're going to need to do something different to separate yourself from the field when you're competing against thousands of other people. But you want to make the smart play. And more often than not, Cyborg should win this fight. And the odds dictate that at minus 550 right now. So give me Cyborg by finish inside the distance. Next up, we have the main event of the evening. We've got Max Holloway taking on Frankie Edgar. Max Holloway coming off of a very competitive fight where he sustained a lot of damage against Dustin Poirier. Max Holloway, 20-4 record, 145 pounds, cut weight, made the weight yesterday. And Frankie Edgar looked great on the scales. 37 years old, 6,800 in DraftKings, plus 305 underdog. Man, the Cub-Swanson fight. I'm not hearing people talk about that fight. It was right after the death of Frankie Edgar's father. At home in New Jersey. only a few months after he was knocked unconscious by Brian Ortega, and he went the distance. Didn't go for a lot of takedowns. And in this spot, taking on a Max Holloway who throws big, big, big volume. Volume that that we haven't seen from other fighters at that weight class. Holloway comes in with a 1-inch reach advantage. Only 27 years old, minus 385 at the betting window, 9,400 in DraftKings. As I mentioned earlier, Max Holloway has come close to breaking the scoreboard a few times. He just needs an opponent to stand in front of him and eat those strikes. Frankie Edgar is going to be bopping and weaving. He's going to be looking to take this fight down to the ground and try to hold Holloway there, similar to the way he handled Yair Rodriguez, and just basically become a savage on top, landing elbows. And anytime Holloway tries to scoot, shrimp up, he is going to be one step ahead of him. At least that's his thought process here. Max Holloway, though, he's been in spots like this before. Not against this level of wrestler, though. So I understand why the line has been closing to where it is now, though you still have Max Holloway as a significant favorite. This fight is not expected to go to a decision. I think folks are putting a lot of stock into Edgar's previous performances, the ones other than the Ortega fight and the Swanson fight. You look at that Chad Mendes victory. That was back in 2015. Another thing to mention is that Frankie Edgar has been off for a while, about a year and a half, almost 2 years. And that's due to he suffered a bicep tear and it wasn't healing properly. So he had to take some significant time off after that. So he's put in a great camp with Mark Henry. We know Frankie Edgar is a warrior. I got to see him fight Spencer Fisher live in person back in the day. I believe that was in 2007. I cannot believe he's still competing at this stage in the game. And he's here for a title. I understand Frankie Edgar does have a path to victory here. So you may want a few shares of him in DraftKings. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, if Max Holloway is able to get back to his feet, he should, just volume alone, be able to work Edgar over. And at some point, Edgar, I expect him to show his age at 37 years old. Be a little bit slower when he's changing levels, possibly getting caught. Looking forward to this fight tonight, folks. Give me Max Holloway here. I originally played him at minus 350s. The odds have moved around. I had him in a parlay with Deron Wynn and another fight that was originally scheduled to be on this card, Zabit against Brian Ortega, but that fight was canceled. So interesting fight here. Give me Holloway to get the win. Really looking forward to this one. Everyone have a great fight night. I want to thank everybody who's subscribed here, and I want to wish everybody a fabulous fight morning. This video has been brought to you by BetDSI as well as MMA Oddsbreaker. You can follow me on CapperTech as well as BetMMA.tips. And go get it, folks. It's your time.